right. Hi, Advanced Algebra. Just checking in with you, kind of for our weekly check-in here. Few updates, just kind of keeping you in the loop here. First thing, which is I'm working on IC. You guys kind of drew the short end where Advanced Algebra was the third of my 3 classes to kind of get everything updated. So I'm hoping to by the end of the week. My goal is to have IC all updated. Not that there's a ton of stuff, but just a couple assignments that we've had. Everyone's doing fine. Just make sure you're submitting the homework on time, and even that's not necessarily like the big make or break you, but that is part of it, getting it in on time. So just stay on top of that. If you do end up submitting it late, that's fine. It's only a point here or two, but again, because of the pace we're on, I think it's pretty fair to ask you that you're getting those in on time. So stay tuned. Like I said, everyone's doing fine, but by the end of the week, I hope to have that updated. On Friday, we'll do a quiz. I'll release a quiz to you on Friday, and I'll talk more about that as we kind of get into what we have today. So hopefully today is just kind of a short, it's going to be a short, not hopefully, it's going to be a short video. We're just going to run through the 6.2 and 6.3 solutions. Okay, so as opposed to how I would normally post the worksheet somewhere, we're doing it video-wise, and I'm not necessarily going to walk through every single problem. I'm trying to keep it short here for the video for today, and I understand that you can pause anything you need to and check work. So get your 6.2, pause it now, get your 6.2 out, worksheet hopefully completed, and just kind of pause as necessary and check your work. What I have kind of boxed are my final answers. Like I said, I'm not necessarily going to talk through anything in particular. I didn't star anything on these sections as really those properties of exponents that we worked with in the previous chapter. So anything that you're seeing that ends up being like questionable or you're not quite sure if you made mistakes, your options to kind of remedy those are to, obviously go back and watch the video for this 6.2 or 6.3, whatever problem you had, or wherever you had questions, or email me directly. Or if you think I made a mistake, which you've seen in the past, sometimes happens, and so I'm kind of just talking over the top here while you're hopefully kind of pausing and checking any solutions for the 6.2 worksheet. So those are your options for getting stuff clarified. Don't forget about the big ideas. I mentioned that in a previous post. The big ideas textbook, which you all have access to. There's different examples, different stuff going on there too. Backside of 6.2 here, making some graphs involving E, and we saw all the stuff in the 6.2 video. Very similar, I think very simple kind of basic graphs here. They can be more complicated, but I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just kind of asking you to hit the fundamentals, the basics here. Here's a decay, here's a growth. Domain and range is pretty straightforward for both graphs. From 6.2, the only other part that we saw, we kind of did talk a little bit about some other type of compound interest formulas, just as a background to this one. 6.2 specifically was working with compounding interest continuously. That was, we said, was what was kind of the buzzword, the giveaway word, which told us we were using this formula. So I kind of went through and labeled everything. There's my principal, my initial investment, our interest rate as a decimal, remember 0.03, and then 15 years we withdraw the money. So that's about what we'd have after 15 years. So there's 6.2. Go back and watch anything, any of the previous videos, or scroll through this one, or pause on this one if you need to look at something a little closer. Okay, 6.3, the most recent one. Definitely, I think, tougher in the sense that we're working with logarithms. For most of us, probably an unfamiliar concept. So kind of going through them here, we said the big skill was just that ability to rewrite logarithms and turn them into something that we're much more comfortable with. So, for example, grabbing this first one, log base 4 of 16 equals 2. Craziness, right? Well, if I understand how a logarithm works, that's really just an alternate way of writing 4 to the second power equals 16. And when we say that and we see that, we say, oh, it's easy. Of course, 4 to the second is 16. That means the same thing, log base 4 of 16 equals 2. So that was kind of the big concept. Obviously, that's going to be something that if you missed or you didn't see that video, you're going to want to go back and watch. because most of it involves that idea of rewriting, going back and forth. I think that's kind of the easier way, going from log to this. You're seeing these ones here maybe going from an exponential expression or equation back to logarithmic form. Both of these were kind of those special logs with a base 10 and a base e. So remember, we do want to rewrite those. I did have a step where I kind of wrote it just with the bases. But remember, with an e base, that's ln, natural log. And with the 10 base, that's just our common log where we don't actually write the base. So something to kind of pay attention to there. The ones without the calculator, again, we're rewriting them, go from logs to exponential. Some of them are easier than others. We saw with the video, the lesson video, 7 to the second power equals 49 to the 0, hopefully. And you can kind of, I know it says without a calculator, but you can kind of guess and check a little bit on these ones. There were some with exponents that involved, negative or fractional ones. So those are ones to go back and look. We did some of those on the notes. 9 through 12 was just calculator practice. This last one involved 3 times the natural log of 0.5. So just make sure you do this part first, times 3. Okay. The next 2 sections really involve inverses. Both of these were kind of that much simpler type, basically a log base of something with that same base as an exponent base. What we kind of saw was they canceled out and you were left with whatever was left, basically, the x in that case. Here we've got a power base to a log base of the same 30, so those all just kind of wipe each other out, and you're left with that 4 there. All right. I think probably the toughest part of the lesson, I mean, it's obviously all going to be individual, but was this finding the inverse of the function. So I wrote the same steps that we talked about. I kind of summarized them here that we talked about in the notes. 2 to 3 steps, kind of depending on what you have. Change of form, so there it is for the second, third, fourth, fifth time maybe in the notes, as far as that's a skill we got to be able to do. So we go from log, if it starts in log, it's got to go, your final answer is going to be an exponential form. Okay, so remember the crossover, 8 to the y power equals x. So that's my first step. I've changed forms. The second step was switch your x and your y around. So all I've done was literally switch x and y. So now it's 8 to the x power equals y. This last step is just, if this y, once after I switch, isn't by itself, if there's like a +1 or something going on here that was still with the x originally, just move it to the other side. We'll see it here in 17. But that was the process. I wrote also that you could switch your x and your y from the start, if that was kind of your thing. Just make sure you don't double switch them, at the end or whatever. So 15 and 16, pretty straightforward. I think 17 and 18, a little bit more. Well, they are just more complex as far as what's going on here. So there's a base that you can't see. It's the first thing that makes this one tougher. So I wrote the e in there, crossing it over, e to the y power equals this whole thing, right? Just like this. 8 to the y power equals this whole thing. There's just nothing else there with it, but it equals x. So that's the first part. Well, there's 2 parts there. No base, and it's equal to this whole thing. After I make my switch, so now it's e to the x equals y plus 1. Here's what we just talked about. There's something with the y. So I want to get rid of this +1. How do you get rid of it? You subtract it. Get that y by itself. So it just comes over to this side of the equation as -1. I'm just rewriting it as y equals. This is, you could write this as your final answer. I'm just flipping the equation. I think 18, as much as anything else, is probably the toughest one. There's different ways to kind of go about this. I actually got rid of the 3 first, just to get to the 2 to the x power by itself on one side of the equation. I just thought it would be easier for me to rewrite this, because now I can see my base is 2. There's nothing else with it. So log base 2, remember, just use I would write this first and then kind of check it. Is this what I wrote for step 1 the same as this right here? 2 to the x power equals this whole thing, kind of like we just saw right there. 2 to this power equals this whole thing. Sure. All right, so I'm going to switch my x and my y. And actually, I'm done. Now, had I not moved this 3 right from the start, I'd have that kind of as a step with the y right here. So I guess you kind of have choice of when you're going to do it. In this case here, I couldn't do that because it was grouped with the x, with the parentheses there, but I could kind of hold off on this and just say log base 2 of y equals x. and then I'd have a +3 hanging out over here with this. So it's a little bit, I think that's when it'd be easier just to do it that way. Last couple, doing the graphs still involves that step of rewriting. Okay, so rewrite this 4 to the y power equals x, 1/3 to the y power equals x, and just make your table backwards. Pick y values, plug it in for y, see what you get for x. Still plot it though as xy coordinates, just like you always would, the point 1, 0, 4, 1, 16, 2, same as over here. Again, go back and watch that section if you need to. But those were making the graphs. Last portion, I like this section. I know it's one that some people brush over real quick, but what are these values? They're not exact values. I don't know exactly what they are, but 5 to what power is 23? Well, you can kind of see it here. It's somewhere between 1 and 2, right? 5 to the first power is 5. 5 to the second power is 25, and we're not quite to 25, so it's pretty close to 2. So that was kind of my process on these. I never actually calculated like what these exact values were. I know this one's going to be a little bit over 2 because 6 squared is 36, and we're a little bit bigger than 36. So I know this one has a bigger value than this one. 7 to a little bit over 1, but it's not even close to 2 because 7 to the second power is 49, and we're only at 8, so it's just over 1. So this is definitely the smallest. And then here, 2 to the third power is 8, so I know I'm at least to the 2 to the third power. 2 to the fourth power is 16, so we're somewhere between 3 and 4, but that's enough just to kind of see where my values are in between. This one's between 3 and 4, this one's between 1 and 2, this one's between 2 and 3, and this one's between 1 and 2. I can tell here that this one's a little bit closer to 2 versus this one a little bit closer to 1, so that's how I determined that this one was bigger than this one. So that ended up being your final order. So there's your the 2 homework assignments from Chapter 6, 6.2, and then 6.3. Go back and rewatch anything that you need to. So going forward for the rest of the week, really, here's what I have for you. I have obviously attached to this assignment, there's a 6.2, 6.3 review worksheet. I'm leaving it as an optional worksheet, so I know everyone hears that and says, oh, I ain't doing it. Well, just be careful there, because our schedule for the week and into next week is this, that obviously it's Wednesday today. My thought would be you'd have all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, and then I'll post solutions to this in the morning on Friday. Okay, so if you did the optional review worksheet, you're going to be able to go through and check. I'll do kind of the same thing where I'll release a video, kind of just real quickly going through. It's a front back, type of worksheet, kind of condensing everything, logs, and then e-bases all together. But my thought process was you get the optional review done, check it Friday morning. At that same time or shortly after, I'll release a 6.2, 6.3 quiz. And then the idea would be, you just check this, you check the solutions right away Friday morning, and then why not just crank out the 6.2, 6.3 quiz Friday during the day. I'm not going to have it as a deadline Friday, but that would be kind of my perfect scenario situation I'd kind of have in mind for you. So I'll say it says it obviously in the directions here, but 6.2, 6.3 review worksheet is optional, but just be careful there. And then Friday I'll release a quiz to you. For the quiz, you'll have, my kind of thought was if you had, in theory, all day Friday to do it, Saturday, Sunday are still available. I don't expect you to necessarily to do that. And then Monday, Tuesday, I think I'll set the deadline at Tuesday midnight. I think is fair to kind of give you 3 technically school days, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, plus any weekend time in there. It's going to be a Google form, which I've never done before, so this is our first time kind of doing this. So I'm hoping everything works smoothly. But it's one of those, like, once you start it, your answers don't save until you submit it. So, and I'll put all that stuff directions-wise in it and everything. So that's kind of the plan. That takes us through next, really, Tuesday evening, and then we'll look at moving ahead to 6-4 stuff on Wednesday, Thursday next week. So please, please, please reach out to me with any questions, whether it's logistical, like I'm having trouble submitting, or whether it's I'm having a hard time accessing the videos, or whatever. Let me know if there's something like that, or if it's concept-wise, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know we just went through a bunch of solutions, but that's not always the answer to, that doesn't always answer all your questions. So please, please, please reach out to me. Let me know if you're struggling with whatever it is. I think our pace is hopefully very manageable for you. It's usually about once or twice a week where we got something going on. And they're not usually that long, other than the videos I get are sometimes long. That's why this one, hopefully, we're just at the 15-minute mark. So I think it's very reasonable here for a Wednesday. Okay, so get those checked. Hopefully you have all your homework solutions checked by now. Get this done. It's an optional 6.23. It's not going in the grade book, but I think it would help you. It would greatly help you as far as the Google Form quiz that's coming out this Friday. So that's all I have for you today. Let me know if there's any issues, and you'll hear more from me on Friday. All right.